All right, today we're going to go over some factoring, and we want to review three types of factoring today: factor the GCF out, factor trinomials a equals 1, and factor out trinomials where a is unequal to 1. We're going to start with the factor the GCF. In this case, we have two terms, so we're looking for the biggest thing that divides into both of them. That's going to be your GCF. So 8 goes into both 24 and 8. So I can take that out front. And what we do when we're factoring is undo the distribution. So now we take each one of these terms and divide it by 8. So 24x divided by 8 is 3x, and 8 divided by 8 is 1. You can always check this by checking the distribution. 8 times 3x gives us 24x, and 8 times 1 gives us 8. Here is another one, and this one also has variables in both, so we want to look at this one. We consider each term separately. So 7x squared and 21x in common, they have a 7 because that goes into both of these numbers. They also have an x in common because that goes into both of these. So we would take out 7x, and that would go out in front of the parentheses. And then again, you're dividing each one of these terms by that to get what's inside the parentheses. So 7x squared divided by 7x is x, and 21x divided by 7x is 3. And you can check your work with distribution. 7x times x gives us that 7x squared. 7x times 3 gives us that 21x. That's factoring out a GCF. Now we're going to talk about factoring out a trinomial. When the a value is 1, that means what's in front of the x squared is just 1. So there's nothing written there, so the a value is 1. And there are 3 terms here. In this case, you want to start off by setting up your parentheses. And in order to get x squared, we need an x times an x. So we know x times x gave us this first term. Now we're looking for what goes here. And what you're doing is looking for what multiplies to be this last number and adds to be this middle number. So multiplies to be the last one, adds to be the middle one. So we take this negative 10 and we think about all of its factors: 1 and 10, 2 and 5. It is negative, so we know one of these is going to be negative in order to multiply together and be a negative. Now this middle term is positive, so that tells me that the bigger number is going to be positive. So these would have to be the negative values. When we add negative 1 and 10, we get 9. When we add negative 2 and 5, we get 3. That's the one we're looking for. That matches our middle term here. So these two are the ones that we want, negative 2 and positive 5. That's our factoring of trinomials when we have an a equals 1. So here is a second one. We've got x squared plus 22x plus 72. Now 72 has a lot of factors. So if you don't want to try that on the side here, thinking about all of them, you can use your calculator to find all of its factors. You could do 72 divided by x in your y equals, and then we go to our table. And here are all the things that multiply to be 72. 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 and 24, 4 and 18, and you're going to keep going until you find the one that adds up to be 22x. Now it's positive, and so is this one, so we know both values are going to be positive. The one that adds up to be 22 is right here at 4 and 18. Those add up to be 22, and they multiply to be 72. So we set up our parentheses. X times x gives me that x squared. And we just found that it was 18 and 4. All right, we've got one more here. X squared minus 12x plus 32. Again, you can put 32 divided by x in the calculator to find all the things that multiply together to give you that. Or you can set them up yourself, but you're looking for what multiplies to be this last number and adds to be this middle number. So that's 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 4 and 8. Now we want it to be a negative 12, and they both have to have the same exact sign since it's multiplying to be a positive. So the two signs are both going to have to be a negative in order to multiply and give me a positive and add and give me a negative. When I combine these, that's negative 33. When I combine these, that's negative 18. And when I combine these, that is negative 12, which is what we were looking for. So this is our part that we need for our factors. And so we get x and x. And then we've got negative 4 and negative 8. So that is factoring when a is equal to 1. We've got one more to show you here. This one here has two terms, but it does not have a GCF since there's nothing that goes into both of these terms. We can think about it though as we did those ones we were just talking about. Because that's the same thing as having a 0 in the middle. So we're looking for what multiplies to be negative 36 and adds to be 0. And so x and x. And what multiplies to be negative 36 and adds to be 0 would be a negative 6 and a positive 6. That's going to be true for any time this is a perfect square. But all you're doing is looking for what multiplies to be the last number, adds to be the middle number to go into these factors. All right, now we're going to talk about the ones that the a value is not 1. So in this case, the a value is 3. And there's no GCF here, so we're ready to factor. When your a value is not 1, you're going to have to come up with another method to factoring. And so I'm going to show you a couple different methods. You don't have to know all of the methods. You just need to know one of them that you can do well and be able to factor. So we've got 3x squared plus 10x plus 8. It's natural to think of quadratics as the area of a box, and so you've probably used a box before to multiply. In order to factor, you can use that same box. So 3x squared, you put in the first box. That's my first term. My last term, I put into the last box. What we're going to do is multiply these two together, and we get 24x squared. So we've multiplied these two together, the first term and the last term. And we think about the factors of 24 there that are going to be 10, just like we did on the other ones. And so that's 1, 24, 2, and 12, 3, and 8, and 4, and 6. Since this is positive, and our middle term is also positive, I know all of these have to be positive. So when they add up together, we are looking for the one that gives us 10. Well, that's our last one right here. So 4 and 6 are going to be those middle terms that we need. Those are going to go in the box right here. 4x and 6x will give me that 24x squared when we multiply, and they will add up to be that 10x. Now we take out the greatest common factor out of each row and each column. In these two right here, we can take out an x. X times 3x would give me this 3x squared, and x times 4 would give me this 4x. We do the same thing for this bottom part here. 3x times 2 would give me 6x, and 2 times 4 gives us 8. These are now our factors. So we have just factored this when a is not equal to 1. So 3x plus 4 times x plus 2. That's the box method. You may have learned this other method in Algebra 1, the rooftop, so we'll talk about that one next. With rooftop, you still multiply that first term and that last term, so that's 24x squared. And we're still looking for what adds to be this middle term, so it's still going to be this 4 and 6 since we use the same one. The difference is that you put these parentheses with the first term going into both of those, that 3x times 3x. Then you put the two terms that you just found, that 4 and 6, in the parentheses. Now, if it does not have a greatest common factor, something that can go into both of these, then you leave it alone, so it'd still be 3x plus 4. If it does, then you would divide that out because we have an extra something. So in this case, 3 goes into both of those. So we have an extra 3 here. So we can take that 3 out of both of those. And now we have factored to get 3x plus 4 and x plus 2, which was the same thing we got with the box. So it doesn't matter which method you pick, as long as you are doing it correctly, you will get the same answer. The last method I'm going to go over is slide and divide. So here is another one. With slide and divide, you slide that first term to the end there. And so that gives us x squared plus 3x minus 4. Once you have it like this, the a value's gone. It's a is equal to 1 again. So we're back to that method we learned at the beginning where we can go ahead and set up the two parentheses, x times x, and then look for what multiplies to be negative 4 and adds to be 3. Well, that would be a positive 4 and a negative 1, because positive 4 times negative 1 gives me a negative 4, and positive 4 plus negative 1 gives me a 3. Once we did that, we slide this over, we factor as normal. Now we need to divide by the 2 that we initially slid over. So we would divide both of these by 2. If it divides evenly, then we just divide it. If it does not divide evenly, then you know that's the coefficient here. And so that would be 2x minus 1, 2x minus 1. So this would be our factors. So now as you start to factor, you're going to pick which method you prefer and which one you could do correctly, because that's important too. That's the method that you can use each time as we factor when the a value is not 1. All right, one last problem. In this case here, before you start going into one of the methods, because you see that there's a value in front of the x squared, you always want to take out the GCF first, and this has a GCF. 2 goes into all 3 of these terms. So we would factor out that 2 first, undo that distribution. When we divide each one of these terms by 2, we get x squared plus x minus 20. By doing that, I just made it easier because now I can just factor as if a is 1, because a is 1 here. So that 2 stays on the outside, and we set up the x, and we're looking for what multiplies to be negative 20 and adds to be a positive 1. That is a positive 5 and a negative 4. You want to be really good at your times tables here because that's going to help you be much faster. And so it would stay with the 2 on the outside like that. Always factor out that GCF first. That should always be your first thing to do, is factor out the GCF, then decide which factoring needs to happen.